We are looking at Matthew chapter 9. And we're going to be spending quite a bit of time here in the book of Matthew in the end of chapter 9 and chapter 10. And what we're going to be studying over the next couple of weeks is a passage of Scripture that, if it's not famous in its own right, there are many famous quotes that come from it. For instance, the first one, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Pray to the Lord of the harvest that he would send forth laborers to do his thing." That's a quote that many of us have heard. It's a verse that we have quoted ourselves. Well, it's found in this passage that we're going to study. Another one, "Shake the dust from your feet." We've all heard that phrase before. We've spoken that phrase. That comes from the passage that we are about to study. The phrase where we've all heard when Jesus instructs his disciples to be wise as serpents, but to be harmless as doves. That quote is going to be found in this passage that we are studying. When Jesus tells us that we should not be afraid of him who can kill the body, but we should fear him who has the power to kill both the body and the soul. That is found in this passage. Not only this, but when Jesus talks about anybody who loves his father or his mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anybody who loves his brother or his sister more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who does not hate their own children, their wife, their parents, everything, they're not worthy to be called my disciple. That whole passage about Jesus saying these things, that is found in this section that we're studying. And there are many other quotes too that I'm sure for many of us are familiar. We've heard them, we've said them, we've thought about them. But maybe, just maybe, we haven't really examined a lot of these things in their context and what's going on. Well, that is the passage that we're fixing to get into. We're fixing to get into Matthew chapter 10 in particular, where Jesus is instructing his disciples before he sends them out to do public ministry. So at this point, we have been studying the life and ministry of Jesus. He's been baptized. He's been rejected by his hometown. He's gone around. He's been healing people. He's done all kinds of miracles. He taught the Sermon on the Mount. He's been delivering people from demons. He's been fighting with the Pharisees. Like, all this crazy stuff has been going on. He's been teaching in parables. And now we're getting to the point where Jesus, at about the end of the second year of his public ministry, is about to send his disciples out to the various peoples in Israel so that they can minister, so that they can heal the sick and cast out devils and preach things concerning the kingdom, so that they can go and labor in the harvest field, as it were. That is the passage that we're going to study. We're going to study Jesus and the instruction that he gives to his disciples before he sends them out. So, any questions or anything before we start to get into it? Are those famous quotes, were those all quotes that you guys have heard before? They're like close to the tip of your tongue. Renata says no. Just give it some time. You'll hear them more as you go, I'm sure. Some of these things like... Yeah, some of these things like shaking the dust from your feet, that's a phrase that has made it just kind of into the normal stream of consciousness. Like, that's an idea that even people who have never read the Bible have probably heard that phrase, shake the dust from your feet. Some of these other ones would just probably be more known to like Bible readers and stuff. But these are some pretty famous teachings of Jesus. These are some pretty famous one-liners, and a lot of them are found right here in Matthew chapter 10. So I want to talk about kind of an overview first. So we're introducing this entire thing today, but it is a very long passage. It's like at least 42 verses. Chapter 10 is 42 verses long, so we're not going to get through this all in 1 week, obviously. We're going to have to break it into smaller chunks. And what I would like to do tonight is to just do like a very quick overview of everything that we're about to read, everything that we're about to study. And we're not going to get real deep into it right now, but I would like for us to like read the whole chapter and kind of get an idea, get our feet situated, get under us about what it is that we're going to be studying for the next, 6 to 8 weeks or so. So let's start in this passage that I told us to open to. Let's start with Matthew chapter 9, actually, and we're going to begin our passage. We're going to begin reading here in verse 35. So let's read verses 35 through 38 of Matthew chapter 9.
Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field."
Okay, so this is where we're starting this evening, and this is where it all really starts, because this is where Jesus observes that there's so many who are eager, who desire to hear his words, who desire to follow him, who desire to know what it is that he's talking about. And he says in this line, pray to the Lord of the harvest that he will send forth laborers into the harvest. And then we get into chapter 10. And chapter 10 just happens to be all about Jesus, who is training up these laborers to send them into the harvest. It's the instructions he's giving to the laborers as the Lord of the house or whatever, as he's sending those laborers out into the harvest. So pray that this happens, and then it's backdoored with Jesus now instructing these laborers, right? As he sends them out himself. So let's pick up and read verses 1 through 4 of chapter 10.
And when he had called his 12 disciples to him, he gave them power over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease. Now the names of the 12 apostles are these: first, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, whose surname was Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him.
Okay, and so it begins then with chapter 10 listing the 12 apostles, the 12 disciples, right? And we've already talked about the 12 disciples. We talked about this quite a while ago, actually. And we've gone over each one of these individuals and what we know about them, some of what tradition has to say about them. We have gone over and looked at each and every one of these 12 apostles before, a little bit earlier in our Bible study. Matthew, of course, picks up here. Again, I just want you to notice the sequence. He says, the harvest is plenty, the laborers are few. Pray to the Lord of the harvest that he will send forth laborers. And then it lists these 12 laborers. And then the next passage that we're about to read is all about the Lord of the harvest instructing those laborers on how they are to go about their labor. So it's not a coincidence that this is the way that it is. Matthew put these things together like this on purpose. So it's important that we pay attention to that. Let's look at verses 5 through 10.
These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions: do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, proclaim this message: the kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Do not get any gold or silver or copper to take with you in your belts, no bag for the journey or extra shirt or sandals or a staff, for the worker is worth his keep.
All right, I'm going to read the verses 11 through 15. It says, in whatever city or town you enter, inquire who in it is worthy, and there abide until you leave. And when you come to a house, salute it. And if the house be worthy, let your peace come upon it. And if it be not worthy, let your peace return to you. And whosoever shall not receive you, nor hear your words, when you depart out of that house or city, shake the dust from off your feet. Truly I say to you, it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. So this section here, basically verses 1 through 15 here, I have described as the 12 commissioned and sent forth, or instructed rather. So they are commissioned and they are instructed. These are the 12 apostles. These are the initial laborers that the Lord is sending into the harvest, and he is giving them their initial instructions. And we saw what some of those were. Don't carry any gold. Don't take an extra stick. Don't take an extra coat. Wherever you go, find a worthy house. Let your peace there. All the stuff that he said. These are just some basic instructions. that the Lord is giving his disciples. And when we look at this passage together, we'll look at it obviously much more in depth, find out what that meant to them and what it means to us today. Are these instructions that the Lord is giving us today? Are we being called to go out and to minister and to not give any thought to how we're going to provide for ourselves or our families or what's going to happen? How far does this carry? These are all questions that we're going to talk about as we get into it. But besides this, there is another section, and he's going to go on here from verses 16 to 23, and he's going to talk about things concerning rejection and persecution. So he's gathered them together, he's giving them their basic instructions, and now he's going to give them a warning. So will somebody please read for us verses 16 through 19.
Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to councils and scourge you in their synagogues. You will be brought before governors and kings for my sake, as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. But when they deliver you up, do not worry about how or what you should speak, for it will be given to you that hour what you should speak.
All right, so now he's giving them a warning. He's giving them instructions, and now he's telling them, listen, you're going to go out here and they're going to hate you. They're going to reject you. They're going to bring you before councils. They're going to beat you. They're going to bring you before synagogues. They're going to bring you before even kings and even the Gentiles, right? He's telling them all of these things that are going to happen to them. And of course, we see all of this being fulfilled in the book of Acts. We see all of this being fulfilled in church history. Excuse me. But we see these things that Jesus is telling his disciples actually being fulfilled in their lives and in their ministries, where you think about people like Peter and John who were brought before the Sanhedrin and they were beaten for preaching Christ and they were arrested and eventually many of them were killed and tortured. You think about the Apostle Paul, who was brought before governors, who eventually made his case before Caesar himself in Rome, the king, So these things that Jesus is saying happened. This was true. These things happened in the lives of the people who were hearing him say it. They went out in Jesus' name and they were hated, they were rejected, they were persecuted for their trouble. So before any of that ever happened, he's telling them this is going to happen to you. But he says in verse 19, not to worry too much about it. Don't think about what you're going to say because, will somebody please read verses 20 through 23?
For it will not be you speaking, 20 through 23.
Mm-hmm.
For it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by everyone because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. When you are persecuted in one place, flee to another. Truly, I tell you, you will not finish going through the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes.
Okay. So there he is. He's telling them, you don't have to worry. When this happens, don't worry about what you're going to say, because it's not going to even be you who's speaking, but the Spirit of your Father will speak in you and through you, right? And then he describes more of what it's going to be like. Even your closest relationships will betray you. Even, a brother will deliver up brother, father, child, children, parents. So you will be hated of all men for my name's sake, he says. And he says, when you're persecuted in one place, flee to another. Okay? These are just some further instructions that he's giving them, specifically concerning rejection and persecution. But there's more, because he's going to go on, and for the next 10 verses or so, he's going to talk about student and master. So we've seen already the 12 are commissioned and how they are instructed. We're going to talk in depth about Jesus' teaching concerning rejection and persecution. But he also has something to say to his disciples about this idea of him being the master, them being the student, and what they should expect as a result of that. So let's go ahead and read now verses 24 through 27.
A disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for a disciple that he be like his teacher, and a servant like his master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more will they call those of his household?
And verse 26 and 7 also.
Okay, therefore, do not fear them, for there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known. Whatever I tell you in the dark, speak in the light, and what you hear in the ear, preach on the housetops.
And so he's giving them here, you see, this pretty basic instruction. Basically he's saying they hated me, of course they're going to hate you. The student is not better than the teacher. The servant is not greater than the master. If they hate the master, if they hate the teacher, they're going to hate the students. They're going to hate those who belong to his house. You belong to my house, Jesus says. They're going to hate you. He's giving them these instructions. He's telling them what it's going to be for them, the kind of persecution they're going to face, the way that they're going to be perceived in the world because of their association to Christ. So this hatred that the disciples receive is not necessarily because of themselves. It is on behalf of Christ. The people who hate them, they hate them because they hate Christ. And that this is basically what he's telling them. I'll read the next little part of this. I'll pick up in verse 28. He says, do not fear those who kill the body but are not able to kill the soul. Rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not two sparrows sold for a farthing? And not one of them will fall on the ground without your Father. But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Do not be afraid, therefore, for you are of more value than many sparrows. Whoever shall confess me, therefore, before men, him I will also confess before my Father which is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, him also I will deny before my Father which is in heaven. And so this is a passage here, of course, where Jesus, again, he's talking about this relationship of student and master, but he's telling them at the end of this, yeah, they're going to hate you, but don't worry. Like, God's got you. You are much more valuable than a bird, and not even a bird, which is worth 5 cents. It falls to the ground, God knows about it. He knows what's going on with you. He cares about what's going on with you. Even though you're going to face all these things, he says, do not be afraid. And then he gives these very important words. Whoever confesses me before men, I will confess him before my Father. But whoever denies me before men, I will deny him before my Father. So the instruction there, of course, is in the face of this hatred, in the face of this rejection, in the face of this persecution, we obviously are to endure through that, to confess Christ no matter what it costs us. And if, the condition is if we do that, Christ will confess us before the Father. But if we deny him, we will be denied by him. So we see how all this is fitting together. That is all of that. And now look at basically what is the last section, essentially. Let's read verses 34 through 36. Let's start there.
Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household.
Okay, so now he's going to get into this section that I call the cost of discipleship. The cost of discipleship. What does it actually cost you to be a follower of Christ? And the answer is everything. Spoiler alert, answer, everything, right? And this is something that he's going to get very in-depth. You've already seen, look at these words. Do not think that I've come to bring peace, but rather a sword. And he says, I have come to set people against each other. Even people in their own house are set against each other because of Christ. It says a man's enemies will be in his own household. And again, these are things that we have seen fulfilled historically. These things are fulfilled even today in many places of the world. Consider, for instance, you're like in the Middle East somewhere. You are in an Islamic country, for instance, and you convert to Christianity. Well, what is most likely going to happen to you in that situation is that you will, at best, be completely disowned by your family. Completely rejected, completely kicked out of the family, kicked out of the community, like just disowned and totally rejected. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, you'll be put inside of a cage and set on fire in the public streets for a spectacle. That's a very real cost that people are facing this very day. And it's hard for us to hear these words and imagine what he could possibly mean by this, but for the people who live in a context like that, they hear these words of Jesus, and it's very crystal clear to them that because of their commitment to Christ, they now have enemies who are in their own household. They are a daughter who, is turned against the mother, or the mother is turned against the daughter, and all the things that he says. And that is true not only now, but that's always been true. To one degree or another, in various times, in various places, this is the effect that Christ has. There is a certain cost to following Christ. Sometimes it will cost you everything. It'll cost your family. It'll cost your comfort. It'll cost this peace that he's talking about. But it doesn't end there. I'll pick up in verse 37. He says, "He that loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. He that loves his son or his daughter more than me is not worthy of me. He that does not take up his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He that finds his life shall lose it, but he that loses his life for my sake shall find it." And this is the passage that I call the cost of discipleship, where Christ is basically in this passage telling us that our commitment to him should be such that the most serious and important and commitments that we have in this world, that to our siblings, that to our parents, that to our children, should pale. They should look like hatred in comparison to our desire to be with Christ. And we'll talk more about this in depth and what exactly he means and what exactly he doesn't mean when we get to this passage. But for now, as we look at it, that really is what he's laying out. It is the cost of discipleship. And then once we get through that, I want to finish it all up by looking at verses 40 through 42. So will someone please read verses 40 through 42?
He who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. He who receives a prophet in the name of a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward. And he who receives a righteous man in the name of a righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. And whoever gives one of these little ones only a cup of cold water in the name of a disciple, assuredly, I say to you, he shall by no means lose his reward.
And that is where all of these instructions come to an end. And this is the passage that we want to study, to break down, to look at over the course of the next probably, like I say, 5-6 weeks, depending on how long this goes. But this is it. So that's our kind of basic overview. Are there any questions, thoughts, or comments so far? Go ahead.
In verse 38,
Uh-huh.
what is he talking about? Take his cross.
Well, that's a good question. So, and it's interesting because this is the first time that he said it, right? And what does it mean when Jesus says, "He that does not take up his cross and follow after him is not worthy of him"? First of all, what is a cross? And I don't want you to think, what is a cross to you, a 21st century American? I want you to think, what is a cross to a first century Jew living under Roman imperial rule?
Yeah.
A cross is death. And it's not just death, is it?
Humiliation.
It's humiliation. It is unimaginable, unbearable torture and horror. It's a public execution, but it is a public execution that is so graphic and so painful and so just disgusting. It was the kind of thing that Roman citizens would not even discuss, like at a dinner party or at the table. It was impolite, it was improper to even discuss crucifixion among Roman nobility. They wouldn't even talk about it. It was so bad. And so Jesus is saying, basically, if we were to translate this, he who does not take up his electric chair and follow after me is not worthy of me. What do we think that means? What does that mean in the context that it's delivered? Because remember, this is in verse 38, which is couched in this whole thing that talks about you're going to be hated. You're going to be betrayed. You're going to be slandered. You're going to be brought before councils and kings. They're going to beat you. They're going to condemn you. They're going to hate you because they hate me, he says. But don't be afraid of all of this. Don't be afraid of the one who can kill the body. Be afraid of the one who can kill the body and the soul. Oh, and by the way, he says, if you don't take up your cross and follow after me, you're not worthy of me. Just like if you don't hate your father and mother, you're not worthy of me. If you don't love me more than your own children, you're not worthy of me. Oh, by the way, if you don't take up your cross and follow me, you're not worthy of me. So what do we think that means? What does that mean in light of everything that we've just talked about?
If you're not fully committed,
Yeah.
is what it means to me.
Yeah, there's a commitment level there, right?
You gotta be fully committed. He's already warned you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, are you still committed to Jesus Christ and committed to spreading the news?
Yeah.
Gotta be fully committed.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment, really. And you think about it, like in this whole context, especially thinking about the cost of discipleship, he's basically saying to the multitudes here, or to the disciples anyway, this is what it costs to follow me. Everyone's going to hate you. Your social standing is going to be nothing. People are going to think of you as a criminal. Your own family is going to turn against you. You're going to have enemies in your own household. They're probably going to kill you. But if you don't take up your cross and follow after me, then you're not worthy of me. And that's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. Does that make sense? Does that kind of answer the question?
I guess because they had a lot of people dying before Christ on the cross. Maybe that's why he said take the cross.
Yeah. Well, you think about the cross, like the cross again, it was a form of public execution. It was, that's what it was. And so I think what he's basically saying is like, if you follow me, they're going to kill you. Like you're going to die following me. And if you're not willing to die, if you're not willing to take up that cross, if you're not willing to embrace death on my behalf, then you're not worthy of being my disciple. And that's a very hard saying, right? It's very easy for us to kind of casually say, oh, this is what he's saying, that's what he means. It's a totally different thing to actually live that out, right? So it's easy to say this is what it means, but that's a pretty radical statement. That's a pretty radical thing. And it's hard for us, again, it's hard for us to really even comprehend a lot of the stuff he's saying here because it's just so foreign to us. The idea that it would cost us anything to follow Christ maybe this isn't the case for you, but for me, it's really hard to even put these connections together because it's like in my life, it hasn't cost me anything to follow Christ. In fact, it would probably cost me more to not follow Christ than it does to follow him. I don't actually have any negative repercussions from the world because I follow Christ. In fact, probably my social status is elevated because I follow Christ. Probably I'm more respected because I follow Christ, not less. And so it's hard for me to imagine a context in which my family hates me, everybody wants to kill me, I'm having to really weigh these, is following Jesus really worth losing everything, even my life? I can't even imagine being in a situation where I'm having to weigh these options. That being said, thousands and thousands and thousands of our brothers and sisters throughout history have faced exactly that kind of situation. And there is no promise that we ourselves won't at some point. We can just pray that we can avoid all that because it's better, I think, to avoid it if we can. So anyway.
Has Christ ever refused to heal someone?
Well, so far in what we've seen, I don't think I've seen any instances of Christ refusing to heal anyone. Unless you want to say so here's an interesting thought, and I don't know the answers to these questions, I'm just thinking now. But there's throngs of people, there's crowds, multitudes, and many of them are sick. And I wonder, did every single person get healed? And then, so let's say that there are some people in the crowds who don't get healed. Well, does that mean that Jesus was refusing to heal them? Because obviously he could have healed them.
And it says here, it's according to your faith.
Yeah.
He says, I'll heal you, but you got to have the faith. The man next to you might not have the faith.
Where are you looking at?
Chapter 9, 28.
Back at the very
blind
beginning.
man.
Yeah.
He said, according to your faith. Does that mean if all of you blind and you really believe, you'll get your sight? If you got the faith.
Yeah. Well, yeah, in 28 and 29, because in 28 he asks him, do you believe that I am able to do this? And then you remember back up and even more into verse 27, because Jesus was leaving and these people were crying out, Son of David, have mercy. Son of David, have mercy. So they believed that Jesus was this Son of David messianic figure. And then they're asking for healing. And that's what he asked them, do you believe that I can do this? And I think in a sense, what Jesus is really asking them is like, do you believe that I'm the Messiah? That's what it seems like. And then they say yes. And then his answer is, well, according to your faith, then be it to you. And then they were healed. And so we do see Jesus saying that a few times, according to your faith, whatever, whatever. And then people receive whatever they have, indicating, yeah, it's according to their faith. But as far as did Jesus ever refuse to do a miracle for someone? I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Unless you want to say every person who didn't get healed, Jesus was refusing to heal them. But that's I don't know, that's a stretch too far to me, I think.
Well, then, what you were saying about, if you have faith, remember when he went to his hometown?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he could only heal one or two.
Yeah.
Because he said, everybody still sees me as the carpenter and not who I truly am. And I can't do any more healing here.
Yeah.
We had to use those crosses over and over again, because there wasn't that much wood, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of wood.
She's talking about out in the desert.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they I'm sure they reused crosses. I'm sure they did. I don't know if they reused crosses or not. I'm sure they did. I don't know why they wouldn't. Yeah, I don't know why they wouldn't.
Unless they nailed it, nailed you to the cross. They
Yeah.
can nail the others though, right?
Yeah, I think most often the way that the cross thing it was common for them to nail people to the cross. That was very common. A lot of times the cross would just be like a beam, almost like a railroad tie type thing. And the people would have to carry it, like you see, upon their back. But it would mount on top of something. So a cross really looked like a T most of the time. And it would mount right there on top. But they would be nailed hands and feet like what you typically see with the crucifixion. That's how they did it. And, they would tie them to it and nail them to it. And it was just a horrific way of dying. Actually, the way that most people died on the cross was from asphyxiation. That's how people die. They can't breathe. Their lungs fill up with fluid and they suffocate to death over the course of hours. And while I know this is horrible, but they're tied there, and then you're trying to expand your chest because you can't breathe, and so you're putting pressure on your feet, which are nailed to this cross in order to expand your chest, and it's just horrible. If you want to ruin your lunch, you can look up a YouTube video, the scientific medical explanation of dying by crucifixion, and you can ruin your lunch that way if you want to. It's just a really, really grotesque, torturous way of dying. Really, really bad, really, really hard. And one of the ways they would speed it up, as kind of like a mercy, if you will, is they would, while they were hanging on the cross, they'd come by and break their legs, and then they would bleed out. Like the broken femur, it would just bleed out, and they would die immediately.
Also, you can't push up anymore.
Right.
Get a breath.
Yeah. Yeah, and your body forces you to try to do that. You're just going to do it, and the pain is excruciating. You can't really do it. You got nails in your feet. It's horrible. Yeah, it's a horrible thing. And we see actually in the stories of the Gospels how at the end, when it's about to storm, they come up and they break the legs of the prisoners, and they look at Jesus and they see he's already dead, so they don't break his legs. And that's why
That was prophesied.
Yeah, that's part of a prophecy. But the reason why all of that was happening is because that was the practice. They would break their legs while they're on the cross, and then they would die faster. Otherwise, it would take them hours or days to die. A lot of times their eyeballs would get pecked out by birds while they were still alive, hanging there. Yeah, I don't know why I'm getting into the gross details of crucifixion, but yeah, we're getting into it now. But that's what it was like. Yeah, that's what it was like. And Jesus said, "Take up your cross and follow me." That's what he meant. That's the imagery. I want you to get the imagery in your mind of that's what he's saying. That's what he's calling people to. So yeah. Anyway, any other questions, thoughts, or comments so far?
Okay, I got one.
Uh huh.
Peter was crucified upside down,
That's what they say. Yeah.
So, was his asphyxiation? Because this was all going the other direction, so.
Yeah. I have no idea. I don't know.
What about that nurse?
Well, you can only be upside down so long because all the blood,
Runs to your head.
basically, yeah. And then it's got to return to your heart, and the mechanism for it to return back to your heart is not the best. In our legs, we've got our veins, and when we move our muscles, which causes the veins to be compressed and not compressed, and that moves it up valves back up to our heart. But you don't have that in your head.
You might die quicker.
Yeah, he probably did die quicker. And he might have got poked while he was upside down for all we know. We don't know. But, yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I'm sure it wasn't comfortable. I can tell you that much.
Sure.
That's good. Anything else? Well, this is just an overview. Of course, we're not getting into detail on anything here tonight except for the misery of crucifixion, apparently. But I do want to get in.
Notice if they use the crosses over and over.
Yeah, but you asked one question.
Like you used star.
I'm sure that they did. There was a quote from, I don't remember who it was. I think it was a guy by the name of Erasmus in the Middle Ages, right around the time of the Reformation. And he was making an observation because, in early church history, it didn't take very long before these things called relics started to become a thing. And it would be like, a bone of St. Thomas the Apostle, or it would be like, the Shroud of Turin, if you've ever heard of that, or something like a piece of the cross of Jesus Christ, an actual piece of the wood, And Erasmus, who was a Roman Catholic priest in the 1500s, he said in his day there were enough pieces of the true cross in Europe to build a ship. So this kind of thing was going on. Everybody thought they had a piece of the true cross, and so I don't know whether or not those crosses were being reused or not. A lot of times I know the victims of crucifixion would just be kind of like thrown into an open air grave dump thing. I know that. I don't know about the pieces of wood though. So what I do want to get into though is back up to chapter 9. I would like to look a little bit closer at our kind of introduction passage. So this is where we started in chapter 9 in verse 35. And just to kind of set the stage for us, following along our story chronologically, we just looked at how Jesus was rejected again in Nazareth a week or two ago. We looked at how he went back to Nazareth at the end of the second year of his ministry, and again they rejected him. Sister Bobby mentioned it. He did not do many miracles there because of their unbelief. It wasn't happening. Who is this? This is Mary's son. These are his brothers. These are his sisters. Do we know this guy? How could it be? So he's rejected at Nazareth. But it says here that he goes about from that time. He goes to city, from village to village. He's teaching in all of their synagogues. He's preaching the gospel of the kingdom. He's healing the sick. He's, casting out devils, doing all the things that he does. So he's moving forward. He's ministering here in these places. And it says in verse 36 that multitudes were with him, right? And we have already seen at this point there were multitudes following Jesus. Remember, when we talked about all the miracles that he did, how he went and he delivered the man that was possessed by 1,000 devils or whatever. When he came back to the other side in Capernaum, who was there to greet him? The multitudes, the crowd, including Jairus, the ruler of the synagogue. And when that woman, the woman with the issue of blood, came up and touched him, do you remember what the disciples said? Master, there's a whole multitude of people here. Everybody's here. They're all touching you. What do you mean, who touched me? So even way before all of this, there was already multitudes following Jesus. Everywhere he went, there was already thousands of people thronging him, trying to touch him, trying to get there, trying to be healed in their desperation, right? So it's no different now. He's still got multitudes following him, but he sees them in verse 36. And what does it say in verse 36? He was moved with compassion. Now, this is a very interesting phrase in the New Testament. If you were to look up what this word originally, like in the original language, it gives the idea of the stirring of the bowels. That's what it means. It refers to like your bowels. And you may have heard in the old King James translation, the bowels of mercies. It's because there's this idea, especially in this ancient thought here, this is like an idiom, which just is like a stirring of compassion. And you think about it, for instance, like when you see, I'll give you a good for instance, actually. So this week, I'm listening to like this murder case with this Carmelo Anthony kid who went down for murder for killing that other kid. And when I had like seen the headline that the jury was coming back, I had this feeling of deep sickness in the pit of my stomach, right? And this was, I think, a turning of the bowels. I think this is what is being described here. And I just like really felt sick to my stomach and deeply troubled and deeply burdened. Because for what I have my reasons for feeling that way, but my point is like when you feel that sensation, I think we've all felt it before, that pit in the knot of your stomach on behalf of somebody else's suffering. You hear something horrible has happened and your stomach drops to the floor, or you see something and it's like, that's what they say, like the bottom falls out or whatever. This is kind of a very similar idea. It's describing that stirring of the bowels. And in fact, this particular word is actually only used in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It's only used in these synoptic gospels, and most of the time it's used of Christ himself. This is something that Christ experienced. He had compassion, a stirring of the bowels. He had compassion on this group. There are other instances where it talks about Christ having compassion, being moved to compassion because of somebody's suffering. But it also uses this same phrase in the story of the prodigal son. When it describes the father who sees the son returning home, it says that the father was moved with compassion and he ran out to greet the son. And it says of the story of the Good Samaritan that then the Samaritan man saw the guy on the side of the road. He was moved with compassion, and that led to him tending to his wounds. And so this idea of this stirring of the bowels, this moving to compassion, this is a phrase that is spoken of Jesus a lot. Jesus himself uses this phrase, but it doesn't refer to mercy necessarily, not in the same sense as the Beatitudes where he said, blessed are the merciful. It's actually a different idea. It's a different concept. It's very related, but this is really talking about the feeling, the emotional feeling, the sensation of, just getting that pit in your stomach being moved to compassion. Do you guys know that feeling I'm talking about? Yeah. That's basically what it's talking about. So any thoughts or questions about that?
Well, looking at this, whenever the disciples were following him, he was teaching the disciples as much as he was teaching the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And because the disciples, sometimes they got it, sometimes they didn't. And so,
That's why they were called disciples.
Yeah.
So this is like he's saying, okay, I've taught you enough, you have learned enough, now I will equip you with this power that you have seen me use,
Mm-hmm.
and you know how to use it, and now I'm going to send you out.
Yeah, that's definitely what we've got going on there, especially in chapter 10, right? Him giving them that instruction. But we see, yes, he was moved with compassion. Now, what was the reason why Jesus was moved with compassion?
Because the people were weary, they were just beat down.
Yeah, they were weary. In the King James, it says they had fainted, right? They were basically exhausted. They were exhausted and lying down is the idea that is communicated here. They were weary. They had been traveling with Jesus. They were probably hungry, but they were exhausted. And so this was the reason why Jesus had compassion. He felt bad for them. He felt compassion toward them. But it was not only because they were exhausted to the point of fainting. What is the other reason?
Scattered.
They were scattered, as sheep with no shepherd, he says. So Jesus, looking at these children of Israel, his kinsmen, his brethren, right? The chosen people, as it were, he's looking at them, and he has this feeling of great compassion, the stirring of the bowels, because he sees them just worn out and exhausted and scattered abroad like sheep with no shepherd. And he just feels bad for them. He pities them. In the same way that, if you're a parent and you would look at your child, maybe who was like, I don't know, in a bad situation, whatever the situation may be, and you just feel bad for them. It's that kind of love. These are the covenant people of God we're talking about, These are his very kinsmen. And he looks at them as lost sheep. He looks at them as shepherdless sheep. He looks at them as people who are worn out, they are exhausted, they have no peace, they have no protection, and they are like sheep wandering around, lost with no shepherd. And that breaks his heart, basically. Any thoughts or questions or comments about that? Well, let's look at what he says next. So in verse 37, he says something. What does he say?
The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few.
All right, what do we think he means when he says the harvest is plentiful? What does that mean?
Lots of people to be reached.
Lots of people to be reached.
To reach them.
Yeah, I don't think he was looking out at the barley fields, right?
Okay.
It doesn't seem like he was looking out at the wheat fields and saying, hey, you know what? That sucks about those guys, but they're smashing all the wheat out here. Somebody get them out of here. It's almost time to harvest. I don't think that's what he was saying. I think he is referring to these people as the harvest. They are the harvest. Who is the harvest? First of all, it's the lost sheep of Israel, right? Who did Jesus send his apostles to in chapter 10? We just read it. Who did he send them to?
His disciples.
Yeah, he sent his disciples, but to whom?
Israel.
To Israel. He said, do not go to the region of the Gentiles, but only go to the lost sheep of Israel. These sheep that are scattered, that have no shepherd, go to them. So the harvest is, first of all, these Jews, the faithful, believing Jews who were waiting and looking for the Messiah. That is, first of all, who the harvest was. These lost sheep of Israel that he's looking at. First of all, that's who the harvest is. But even beyond that, the harvest is more than that, because the harvest truly extends out to all who would call on the name of Christ. People from every nation, every tribe, every tongue, right? From the furthest reaches of the world, as it were. The harvest refers not only to the lost sheep of Israel, but to all whom the Lord our God should call, right? That's what the harvest is referring to. And what does it mean when he talks about, so he says the harvest is plentiful, there is plenty, there are lots of people who are looking for the Lord, there are lots of people who desire to know him, who would follow after him, who, are there as he's looking around. Lots of people here, but the laborers are few. What does he mean by the laborers?
People spreading the news.
Okay, yeah, the people, right? There are many people who are looking for rest, who are looking for peace, who are looking for life, and Christ can offer all of those things. The harvest is plentiful. They're there. They're ready to be picked. But there's not a lot of workers. In fact, at this time, there is one worker, right? And his name is Jesus. He's the only one. And it's for that reason he is going to instruct and send out his 12 disciples, right? He is the only laborer right now. And he is lamenting the fact that there is only one. But he has 12 more. And even so, 12, 13 is not a very big number. A baker's dozen is not going to evangelize the entire world, right? It's probably going to take more than a baker's dozen to reach the furthest extent of the world. And so, yes, there is a plentiful harvest, but there are very few laborers. And in the immediate tense, yeah, he's talking about himself, even the apostles. But kind of, again, to stretch it out and to broaden it out, this could be referring to anybody who is engaging in the work of evangelism. Anybody who is engaging in the work of leading people to Christ, telling people about Christ, defending the Christian faith, whatever it may be. Anybody who is kind of engaged out there in the field trying to harvest, like those would be laborers, right? So, go ahead.
What about the angels in the harvest?
Okay, so in the parables, he talks about how in the end times, the angels come and they harvest everything and they gather it all together, right? That's a little bit different of a thing than what he's talking about here. So in the parables, when he talks about the harvest of the angels, that is in reference to like the end time, end of the world, gathering everyone together for the final judgment. when he talks about the harvest here, the harvest being plenteous but the laborers few, what he's talking about, the harvest in this context is not end time judgment as much as it is the people themselves who are like ready to accept Christ, if you will, who are ready and willing to follow Christ. That's the harvest in this context. So it's a different, he's using a metaphor, he's using an illustration, but this time he's using harvest to communicate something very different than he was last time. Does that make sense? Does that sound reasonable?
I just thought maybe he meant there wasn't that many angels.
Well, maybe that's the case too. I don't know about that. But I think I think he's just using this harvest metaphor in a different way here, I would think. But yes, so harvest is plentiful. There are plenty of people willing to receive the Lord, willing to receive the Messiah, but there are very few people out there telling them about it. There are very few people out here actually doing what is necessary to gather that in. So what do we do about it? Verse 38.
Ask the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest field.
Okay, so notice, first of all, that we are commanded here by Christ to pray to the Lord of the harvest that he would send forth laborers into his harvest. So what is the Lord of the harvest? What does that mean?
Jesus.
Yeah, that would be God, right? That'd be the Lord, that'd be God, the Father. We want to pray to God, the Lord of the harvest, right? Who else do we pray to? We pray to God. Through Christ, right? We are praying to the Lord of the harvest, and what is the content of our prayer? That he would raise up and send out workers. And notice what it says at the very end, into his harvest. It is his harvest. We are to pray to God to ask him to raise up and to send out laborers into his harvest, his field. And I'm emphasizing the fact that it is his because it belongs to him. It's not our kingdom. It's not our harvest. It's not something that we are artificially building up ourselves, following all the most clever marketing schemes and things that we can devise in our present day. No, we are praying to God, asking him to raise up and to send out laborers into his harvest field so that we, as his servants, can help participate in his great harvest. So I felt like that was important to point out. But this is something that we are commanded to pray for. This should be a matter of prayer for us regularly. Praying not only that the Lord would raise them up and send them out, but for those he has already raised up and sent out, we should be praying for the people who are laboring in the field right now. And, honestly, we should also be praying that we be equipped to go into the field and doing all of this work as a laborer ourselves. Because the truth is, not all of us are theologians, not all of us are apologists, not all of us can, convince the masses with our dazzling intellect or whatever, but all of us can tell somebody about what Christ has done for us. All of us can share our story about how Christ has impacted and affected our lives. All of us can share the testimony that we have of how Christ has done a significant work in us and the things he has done in our lives. All of us can, even if we don't have training, even if we don't have a lot of knowledge, even if we don't know too much about nothing, we know what Christ has done for us. And sometimes that is as effective of a testimony as anything else can be. Sometimes people just need to hear that God can do something with someone like them, and they need to hear it from someone who is like them. And, you might be that person. So what I'm saying is we should be always praying not only that God would send people into the harvest, but for those who are already laboring in the harvest, and also that we ourselves would be ready to harvest or to do whatever work he has for us to do there in the field, that we would be ready ourselves to do that. So any thoughts, questions, or comments here, looking at what Christ has said?
Well, I would just assume that the throngs of people around Jesus, that as he sent out these workers, and they did show the people around him, each and every one of those, that they have spirits, casting them out, healing all kinds of sickness, all kinds of disease, that there will be thrones of people around each one of them, doing the same thing, begging for help and having faith in their abilities also. And just as Christ had his disciples, I would assume that each one of them had their, I don't know if you would call them disciple or helpers, that would also be learning. And in doing so, the word that Jesus wanted to be spread regarding God the Father and also himself would just go out exponentially.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And many of Jesus' disciples did have disciples themselves, and we know who they are. And those disciples had disciples, and those disciples had disciples. And honestly, you can actually trace that lineage back really, really far. It's actually quite impressive. And there are people who have done that work. But we do know who some of the earliest disciples of the earliest disciples of the earliest disciples were. We do know that happened, and we have their writings, and we know what they were taught. And so that is very fascinating how that developed historically and spread. You're basically taking that one thing, and now there's 12 of them, and they're all going to do their own thing, and it will continue to multiply like that, like she said, exponentially. And the same thing is true in our own lives. If you are in a discipleship relationship with somebody, maybe you're helping minister to somebody, well, then they can turn around and now they're doing the same thing, and that person turns around and they're doing the same thing, and before you know it, now your life is touching the life of 5, 10, 15 people all around you, even though you're really just doing one thing. And that's just kind of that is how the kingdom of God spreads naturally. This is natural evangelism. This is the way. This is the way that Christianity has spread through all of history. This is the reliable way of Christianity spreading. It is through disciples making disciples, who make disciples, who make disciples. That's how Christianity spreads. That's how churches grow. That is the way that it's done. Making disciples that make disciples, that make disciples, that make disciples. And that's how it goes forward. And that is what Christ is preparing them for, as it were. So we see then in this, Christ looking at the people, moved with compassion. He says, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. And then he turns around and he says, hey, all of you laborers, here's what I need you to do. Go out and harvest, right? And it's interesting to me, and I just thought about this while we were in here talking about it, and this is the last thing I'll say. I see a very strong connection in this. And there's another story in Luke a bit later on where it talks about Jesus sending out 72 disciples to do something very similar. But this story, that story, I'm taking these together. I'm reminded of Moses in the book of Exodus. Because Moses in the book of Exodus was one man who, after he received the law, was operating as the judge of all of Israel. And everybody was coming to him for answers. Yeah, he was the mediator between God and man. He brought the living words of God down to them. He was the judge. He was doing all this stuff. But his father-in-law, Jethro, came to him and said, dude, look, you're going to die. You're one man. You can't do all this. You're just one person. Here's what you need to do. You need to commission 70 elders who will report to you and send them out to lessen the load, as it were. And so that is what Moses did on the suggestion there. And he did the same thing. He commissioned and equipped a whole bunch of people so that he could take this authority that he was carrying himself and give it to all of them. And they could go out and they could do more in his place than he could ever do by himself. And it's just an interesting connection. We see Christ doing the same thing. He's kind of lamenting because there's so much work to do, but he's only one man. So he takes these 12 apostles, he takes these 72 disciples, and he commissions them, equips them, and sends them out to go to be 70 places at once, to be 12 places at once, to accomplish more than what he could do in his own flesh. So, just a thought. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments before we wrap up this evening? Well, this is it tonight. This was our introduction to Jesus and his instruction to his disciples. If I had a big point of application tonight, it would be this. Let's obey what Jesus said. Let's pray for the laborers. Let's pray that God would raise up and send out laborers into the harvest. And let's pray for ourselves that God would use us in this harvest. I want to be a workman worthy of my wages. I want to have a sharp sickle and a ready hand to go out. I want to have eyes to see the harvest myself. So as we come to a close tonight, let's just remember and pray about this week. Let us remember to pray to the Lord of the harvest, to raise up and send out workers, to let us be used in that work, and also to pray for those who are laboring. It's hard out there when people are like ministering, serving, doing that with people. People are hard to deal with, and so pray for those who are in that business, who are in that labor of love, as it were, that the Lord will be gracious to them. Amen? Amen. Brother Charlie, go ahead and close us to prayer, if you will.
We